From images immortalized in popular culture, to hushed accounts of those who've endured it firsthand, hazing is still an unfortunate reality in today's society. All too often, it's only when tragedy strikes that the real horrors of hazing are exposed. Although typically associated with collegiate level sports and fraternal organizations, the problem of hazing is by no means limited to college campuses or the Greek system. Hazing is also a relentless epidemic in our nation's high schools, with an estimated 1.5 million students being hazed each year.
Hazing is becoming increasingly common at the high school level. There's no stereotype. Girls do it, boys do it, honor roll students, average kids do it, athletes, other club members. It's very common, unfortunately, often with devastating results.
As educators, administrators, and leaders in your community, it's your responsibility to do everything in your power to protect your students. But are you really doing everything you can to prevent hazing in your school? And should an incident occur, do you fully understand the repercussions for everyone involved, including you? So just what is hazing? And what types of behaviors should you be watching out for? Hazing is any activity involving someone joining or participating in a group that humiliates, degrades, abuses, or risks personal harm, regardless of the individual's willingness to participate. Hazing exists in a wide range of education-based activities, such as athletics, ROTC, performing arts, band, and more. But also may occur in a broader level known as class hazing, where upperclassmen initiate freshmen into high school itself.
A review of the hundreds of court cases from just the last few years involving hazing reveal that there are common threads that run among those cases. The cases usually involve allegations of one of the following categories of behaviors: physical abuse against student athletes, the use of disgusting substances on student athletes, confinement of student athletes, alcohol consumption by student athletes, sexual battery or sexual assault against student athletes, and hazing that takes place away from the school. These are the categories into which most of the hazing incidents fall, and it is incumbent on athletic directors and coaches to monitor any of these types of activities very closely to ensure that they do not escalate into full-blown hazing incidents.
According to a 2008 study, the most commonly seen behaviors in high school hazing were being forced to associate with specific people and not others, singing and chanting not related to a game or event, being yelled, screamed, or cursed at by other members of the group, required participation in a drinking game, sleep deprivation, mandatory tattoos or body piercings, forced consumption of large quantities of non-alcoholic beverages, exposure to harsh weather conditions without proper attire, and forced consumption of alcohol to the point of getting sick or passing out. Although some types of hazing may seem worse than others, hazing is wrong and intolerable in any form because it is degradation and abuse of power. Even seemingly harmless types of hazing can spin out of control and often result in riskier forms of hazing as time goes on.
It seems to be some impulse within us as a group or a society that we demand these rituals of those newcomers coming in. And with the reality TV shows now, with the sort of crazy truth or dare games that our junior high students are going for, there seems to be a less of a respect for the individual and more of a demand that others be our entertainment.
Hazing is sometimes considered a form of group bullying, and although similarities between bullying and hazing exist, one important distinction is that bullying tends to be an act of exclusion or rejection by peers, while hazing is typically associated with group acceptance and belonging. This often complicates efforts to detect and curb hazing, as victims of hazing may actually view their abuse as a privilege or sacrifice, and go through great lengths to protect and cover it up.
Hazing tends to become embedded within the culture of a community. Parents, older brothers, older sisters may have engaged in hazing, and maybe it was a little benign or just uncomfortable at the time, but it typically becomes thought of as a badge of honor, a rite of passage, the thing to do. Unfortunately, there are no restraints on it. Hazing resides exclusively with those who do the hazing, and that's where it becomes dangerous.
Hazing has become increasingly violent over the years, with more incidents of physical and sexual abuse.
There's been a dramatic shift in the nature of hazing over the decades and in recent years. For many, many years, most hazing incidents were fun and games, horseplay type situations with what today we would consider rather innocuous types of rituals. In recent years, however, the shift that's taken place is towards more and more hazing incidents involving sexual assault, sexual battery, simulation of sexual acts, and actual criminal behavior inflicting physical harm upon young student athletes.
And the trauma of beatings, assaults, and alcohol abuse is more than just physical, with powerful emotional and psychological effects as well.
In male groups, it may be more physically aggressive. In female groups, females band together to haze or to shame the person who's trying to get into the group. But realizing what you've done later on results in real sadness and profound regret for the bully as well. But for the victim, there's depression, loss of appetite, loss of ability to really socialize fully. But the greatest effect of hazing is the sense of shame, that you were forced to do these things that were contrary to your sense of integrity, and that you did it to belong to the group. And then there's a lot of damaging self-hatred.
I sink into this depression. Everything, obviously does not have the brightness that I used to. My future seems uncertain. I just, sink in this really bad depression, and I stopped functioning as well as I could.
It's also important to note the possible legal implications for all those involved, including parents, the school, and even you. Currently, every state, except South Dakota, has outlawed bullying or harassing behavior in schools. And hazing is also illegal in all but 6 states in the U.S. Some states, like New York, have strict laws to criminally punish offenders, while other states, like Minnesota, also make it easier for victims to find justice in civil suits. Regardless of the state's anti-hazing laws, serious offenses such as battery and assault can be prosecuted anywhere. And in addition to criminal charges, there's always the possibility of separate civil suits, with parents, coaches, and even entire school districts often named as defendants in negligence claims.
Everyone in the chain of command for a school district will eventually, from a legal standpoint, bear liability. And therefore, I think they are really the ones, both legally and morally, that have an obligation to prevent hazing. Because effective policies really have to start at the top, and all of the personnel have to buy in. Now, that would include a school superintendent, a school district athletic director, the athletic directors at individual schools, and then, of course, the coaches, athletic trainers, and other athletic personnel who are on the front lines of high school athletics. And ultimately, all of them will be held liable legally, and also their moral obligation to the young people with whose charge they have the responsibility. Ultimately, they're the ones that are responsible.
While you can't always be there to watch over your students or guarantee they'll make the wise decisions all the time, there are critical steps you can take to prevent hazing in your school. First, make sure your school has an anti-hazing policy in place with clearly defined terms and consequences. Zero-tolerance policies are best, ensuring that hazing in any form or degree will be punished to the fullest extent.
The policy should be broad enough to treat hazing activities that occur in the community or in preseason camps or in the back of the bus, or in the bathroom, or not directly related to the athletics program. Clearly, if it is a violation of your code, then that violation is treated, and the person who does the violation or commits the hazing act must be held accountable. In the same way we would hold a person accountable for drinking or smoking as violations of the athletic code.
Verify that your school's policy coincides with any anti-bullying or hazing laws specific to your state. For your convenience, a PDF file for each state's laws is included on this DVD.
You do have young people who do make mistakes in your charge, and the mistakes that they make on the football field or on the baseball field can be overcome, but a mistake like hazing, if it also involves unethical or illegal behavior such as sexual assault, serving alcohol to a dangerous or even deadly level and so forth, is to change a lot of lives forever. It's to put a stigma on your school that will never ever evaporate. It's to change, as I said, your career, but it's also to have a loss that you can never replace, and you'll be questioning yourself the rest of your life, what more could I have done? And you will get that question from investigative reporters. What more could you have done? Parents will ask you, what more could you have done? And you will be abandoned by anyone who isn't directly associated with that hazing. You'll find yourself a kind of pariah yourself.
See to it that students, parents, teachers, coaches, and staff are all aware and periodically reminded of your school's policies and state laws. Anti-hazing awareness should be an essential part of your curriculum and openly discussed with students as well as parents at orientations or open houses. Emphasize the importance of respect and accountability for actions, and have both parents and students sign a Code of Conduct pledge, a sample of which can also be found on this DVD. Encourage the development of new traditions and positive strategies for building group unity as alternatives to hazing.
Bring recognition of a positive nature to your team in your high school. Work on projects such as Habitat for Humanity, blood drives, food drives, community outreach to the homeless. Be a general advocate for your community as the high school athletics department.
Urge students to be proactive and notify a trusted adult about any known policy breaches or threats to their safety. A school tip line can be an invaluable resource for combating school violence. If your school doesn't already have one, look into implementing a tip line program. It's also imperative that anti-hazing education be a part of training for all teachers and coaches. Insist that any suspicious or questionable behavior not be ignored or dismissed. Stress that lack of awareness is not an excuse, nor a suitable defense in the event of a lawsuit. Call for increased supervision and vigilance at preseason camps, on buses, in locker rooms, and other areas at high risk for hazing activities. Be sure to report any serious incidents to the authorities immediately, and do not hesitate to suspend coaches or staff for any misconduct or policy violations, including failure to act.
It is critically important that athletic directors be proactive. This is the most important component of an effective anti-hazing policy. You need to prevent the problem from ever occurring in the first place. That requires that an effective policy be created, that included in that policy is a very strong and explicit definition of hazing and the prohibited behaviors for student athletes, that as part of that policy there's an effective reporting mechanism included, and that continuing education is done every year for all athletic personnel regarding the use of that policy.
The athletic director at the high school level will become the focal point of an investigation. Questions will be asked whether or not the AD has been proactive in stipulating a prohibition policy that grows directly from state law. Or if no state law exists, has there been a proactive policy written under child advocacy to protect kids from the abuse and the dangers that are inherent in a hazing activity? And if they are not proactive, then it would not be surprising if the court system and attorneys focused their efforts on indicting an athletic director for failure to exercise an appropriate supervisory responsibility.
Remember, You have an opportunity to directly impact the lives of others, and it's up to you to ensure that all your students are given a safe environment to succeed. So resolve to take a firm stance in the fight against hazing. Help preserve the safety and respect of your students, your school, and your community.